Thanks so much for joining in with me today. As you know, a couple weeks ago, I held my first tele-town hall. Over 5,000 people participated in that tele-town hall, and we took about 20 questions in that 1 hour time frame. A lot of thoughtful questions, especially considering the headlines you're reading about, not only in our local papers, but around the country and in the news in general. I took questions from everybody. In fact, I even took a question from the head of the Democrat Party in Brevard, because I think it's important we hear those concerns firsthand, whether it be Republican, Democrat, or independent. Also, as you probably noticed on social media, I am constantly sending out what's going on in Washington, who I'm seeing, who I'm meeting with, what bills I've sponsored, how I voted. That kind of transparency is very important, and is very consistent with my prior work in the Florida Senate, where I created actually a program called Transparency Florida, where you can go there, see how tax dollars are being raised, spent, etc. It's something I created over 12 years ago, and it's one way to make sure we have absolute transparency in government, because after all, it's your money, and you're the ones who work hard to send that money, in this case, up to Washington, D.C., or in the past, out to Tallahassee. And so transparency is very important to me, and I think it's very consistent and in line with what DOGE is doing. You deserve to know where every dollar is being spent. Sadly, a lot of these things were being spent without a lot of people knowing about it, as you've seen with programs like USAID and others. But that said, I wanted to make sure that we're having a constant conversation, and I really feel like these tele-town halls are the best way to do it, because 5,000 people or more can join. We made sure that the information was up there early and often, so you can sign up for it. And as always, if you did not get an opportunity to ask a question during that tele-town hall, jump on this video today, send in your questions that you have, and we'll be sure to answer it on video or in an email address, because again, your opinion matters to me. It's essential that we have these type of debates. So with that in mind, I want to make sure, first and foremost, if you've not already done so, you can go to any one of my social media pages, and you'll actually can get the 1 hour version of all the questions that we took a couple weeks ago dealing with the tele-town hall. It was from DOGE, it was talking about space issues, it was talking about Medicare, it was talking about Social Security, it was talking about Medicaid, a whole variety of measures that you asked questions about, and I'm glad you did, because it's essential you get those questions answered first and directly for me. One of the issues that's actually come up since our last tele-town hall is the issue of tariffs. If you don't know, what the president has pushed for is what he calls reciprocal tariffs. He's saying whatever tax rate they charge American companies overseas, we're going to reciprocate or charge the same here in the United States. What would be great, in my opinion, is just what I call true fair trade, meaning no tariffs at all. Everybody's got a level playing field, and we're playing with open field. Unfortunately, as you can look across the board, these tariff rates are not equal. All the president has said is, if you tax us at one rate, we expect equal treatment. It's a common American principle, and I'm glad to see the president is standing up for American workers and making sure that the taxes paid are equal across the board, meaning across the world, as opposed to favoritism paid to one side or another. Beyond that, the other big question, of course, we're getting about is Medicare and Social Security. Now, let me be perfectly clear here. And this is coming from a person who actually taught United States history for many years at the college level. I understand both programs very well, and let's make sure we understand something here. Social Security and Medicare are earned benefits, meaning you've literally worked your entire life to earn those benefits when you retire. If you're self-employed, you paid both sides of that tax, meaning the whole freight. If you are an employee of a company, you paid half and your employer paid half. Those are earned benefits. You help people in the prior generation get Social Security benefits or Medicare benefits, and when you retire, you'll get that equal treatment. Now, there is some pressure on these programs because there's, of course, fewer workers per retiree versus when Social Security started back in the 1930s, or with Medicare when it started in the mid-1960s. But bottom line is, I am absolutely against cutting Social Security and Medicare, because those are earned benefits. And again, let me stress that. Earned benefits. And this is something that's so vital, and it's the promise that we have made that if you're working hard and you supported the prior generation, you too deserve to get those price supports with Medicare. But let's also not forget that a few years ago, when Barack Obama was president of the United States, he actually took a substantial amount of money out of Medicare to to pay for Medicaid. For those people who don't know what Medicaid is, it is radically different than Medicare. Medicaid is what we might call welfare health care. It's free for those people who are receiving Medicaid, and it's paid for by taxpayers. And so that's a program that we're going to look at very closely, because it's not an earned benefit. It's one where if you're in a bad financial position, we're going to give you some help because we're compassionate people. All Americans are. But we want to make sure, first and foremost, is that there's no waste or fraud. That is really important. I want people to understand, no waste and fraud is so important. I was just recently looking at some videotapes back, I think from 2010 or 2011, when Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi were talking about taking fraud out of the system. We agree, and that's why the DOGE is so important, because you can see where the money actually went. So when you talk about Medicaid, what we want to do first and foremost is that if you're able-bodied and you're able to work, you're not going to get Medicaid, because that's something you should be out there in the workforce, because there's a lot of jobs available. We can't just, in essence, give incentives for people to be out of work. And so we're going to put that work provision in there. And beyond that, we want to go after waste and fraud. There's some people that sign fraudulent documents saying that they made X amount of money when they actually made more, and they really didn't qualify for Medicaid. We need to make sure that we go in and verify that the income that people are making actually qualifies them for the program or not. Again, that's common sense. It's if you're not telling the truth, you shouldn't be getting a benefit that is intended for people in need. And remember also, programs like nursing homes, I am in full support of. These folks need help. They're in their retirement years. They're hard on their luck, or they have a financial difficulty. They're going to qualify for Medicaid. It's a very clear line of delineation. Also, if you have a condition where you need some help, these are people with handicaps or other things, they too deserve to get those benefits. We're a compassionate society. We should move in that direction. But when you look at Medicaid in general, remember, this is a benefit paid for by other taxpayers. We have to look after every dime. We do that in the state of Florida. We changed the Medicaid program in the state of Florida to make sure there was incentive for people to get off of Medicaid if they got a job, and also an incentive to make sure that only people who truly qualify get there. So when we save money, we're saving the program. If we continue to allow people to have waste and fraud in a program, it's actually diminishing the quality of that program and taking from the people who truly need that benefit. And so I wanted to make sure people understood the difference between an earned benefit and a welfare program, and why it's so vital to differentiate those. But remember, Medicaid is something that's important, and it's one we want to make sure those people truly need receive. So with that in mind, another discussion point that's come out is what's happening with the space program. And I'd say again, since our last discussion, great news. We've seen that SpaceX has now invested an additional $1.8 billion of their money into Brevard County, which is only going to strengthen, of course, the jobs here in Brevard County. We've also seen Lockheed got a huge contract, which will also create hundreds of jobs. I think approximately $600 million to be invested in the Space Coast as well. It is great news for our space workers and people who are really literally reaching for the stars. We're going to the moon and eventually to Mars. Also, with that same vein, which is important, is that we are really investing in this marketplace. And so when you talk about space, that's not just a job, it is a career. And it's one of the things I talked about in the previous tele town hall. So with that, great news about space. We're going to keep pushing that forward. And I'll just add one more thing about the space issue. You may have seen that the changes that are made because of the realities of the budget. Well, in a lot of agencies, there are actually people let go from their jobs. With NASA, myself and both United States senators from Florida, as well as Texas and Mississippi and Alabama, we said NASA is an essential program, much like the military. As you know, we're in a space race right now with China. So we met up with the president and of course the leaders in the White House, and we said we cannot afford to lose any workers at NASA because of the Artemis mission that is due out in the spring of next year. That is the first step of man returning to the moon. And so with that in mind, we talked to the White House, and sure enough, they agreed. The only people that lost their jobs at Kennedy Space Center, at least in our area, were people who chose to take the buyout. That's it. The only other small group that lost jobs, none of them were from Kennedy Space Center, but there are 23 jobs lost in Washington, D.C., and 20 of those 23, from the latest information I've seen, were actually what they call DEI jobs. You talked about those programs that have been kind of pushed away in the new administration. So that's it. Great news. If you're a worker at Kennedy Space Center, you still have a job unless you chose to take the buyout. So great news here on the Space Coast. The space industry is stronger than ever. Biggest investments I've ever seen in my lifetime from the private sector into our efforts here in Brevard County. And it's really great news. So as we get ready to close, I want to make a couple things clear, as I said before. It is essential that you continue to send in by email or text or going on our website and sending in your questions. I'm going to continue to do videos like this because, as you probably know, of the 52 weeks this year, we'll be in Washington at least 34. And as you know, a couple weeks ago, I had the town hall meeting, and here's the sheet of paper. We had Virginia Smythe, I believe her name is, Lucy Horvantz, Dan Heim, Luke Streidel, Pamela Castellan, I think she's the Democrat Party chair in Brevard. These are all people we took questions from. And we just literally, as they came in, we would answer and do our best to go through these and make sure that your questions are answered. And we're going to protect programs that help people who are disabled or in nursing homes of Medicaid who don't have the financial resource. But we're not going to allow waste and fraud and corruption anymore. These DOJ transparency is showing that. As I mentioned before, it's something I'm passionate about. I did in the State House because you deserve to know where every state tax dollar was being spent and how it was raised. That kind of transparency is going to hopefully transform government so that not just Elon Musk, but everybody has the ability to see what's coming down and how your money is being spent. And look, as I always say to people, great ideas in the sunshine prosper and grow. Bad ideas wither and die in the sunshine. And that's the kind of thing we need to say, to keep, there are worthwhile measures within USAID, for example. There's a need where we want to help those areas that are really hit hard by famine or other major diseases. And we're going to help because we're a very generous country. But when some of the workers there were spending money on clearly, let's just say, controversial to be nice, topics, when we had a budget shortfall in the trillions of dollars, it's reason why these things are under the microscope. And I also want to make sure everybody knows, on April the 28th, if you haven't heard, we're going to do another Town Hall. It's going to be at 6 p.m. I'm sure pretty soon we'll put it out on social media again, if you want to sign up for it. And as you know, I've been talking with all our major newspapers, Florida Today, Space Coast Daily, the Vero Beach Press Journal. We've been talking to them consistently and doing interviews with people consistently because you deserve to know. I take this job incredibly seriously. It's something I'm very passionate about, and I believe that America's best days are still ahead if we're willing to ask the tough questions, and in my case, answer the tough questions that you all are sending into us. It's essential. And so remember, April 28th, 6 p.m., we'll have another Town Hall. And again, I believe in efficiency. Think about it. 5,000 people last time got on, are able to hear questions directly from people, including, I think, a majority of Democrats actually asked those questions in our last Town Hall, and hear directly from me without all the other hubbub and political theater. This is a serious time in America. We are, as I'm making this videotape today, there's a chance that the Democrats might vote to shut down the government. They have the power, as you know. It takes 60 votes in the Senate. We've already done our work in the House of Representatives. It takes 60 votes to keep the government open. Right now, there's only 52 votes in the Senate, maybe 53, and we need 7 or 8 Democrats to vote for this in order to keep the government open and not play political games and make sure that all the benefits you've earned are kept in place. But until then, I'll continue to work on the projects that are important to our community, including NASA, the Indian River Lagoon, trying to reduce the cost of gasoline, reduce the costs of rent and other matters by bringing in wasteful government spending and making sure that we're growing our economy. And so We invite you to tune in again on April 28th. And in the meantime, continue to send your questions. And please sign up for our updates that you can get directly from me via email. And it also goes through what kind of we've done during the week, whether it be in Washington, D.C. or back at home. Again, I'm honored to represent you in the United States Congress. It is an honor of a lifetime. I will do my best to serve the needs of our entire community. And again, stay touched. We'll see you on the 28th of April, if not sooner, and continue to send in questions that you have concerned about. Hopefully I've addressed a lot of those questions that have been sent in recently concerning Medicare, Social Security, Medicaid, NASA, DOGE, all those things that seem to be dominating the headlines. But let's hope when you see this video, the government will be open for business and we can continue to move this country forward. Thanks again for tuning in.